All right, folks, we're going to kick off the third hour with the one and only editor of the Weekly Standard, Bill Kristol, who will give us his midterm take. Deputy Press Secretary for the RNC, Rafi Williams, will talk about the outreach to the young voters and the minority community. Managing editor for Sabato's Crystal Ball will be here. Just what is the chance that the Senate will go Republican? Alabama Senator Jeff Sessions says vote Republican to stop amnesty. All that and more.
Election day is tomorrow and a number of gubernatorial races are neck and neck. We'll start by looking at the Sunshine State. Right now, only 1 point separates Florida Governor Rick Scott and Democrat Charlie Crist. However, 9% of voters say they're still undecided, and that could be a huge factor in that race. Meanwhile, President Obama is staying away from campaigning in Senate races, but brought up the Senate while being heckled about immigration reform at a campaign rally for Connecticut Governor Don Malloy.
The Republicans are blocking immigration reform. That's one more reason why we need a Democratic Senate. So I support you. I'm with you. I'm with you. And you need to go protest the Republicans.
Connecticut's governor is in a dead heat with Republican challenger Tom Foley. Now let's turn our attention to the U.S. Senate races. In Iowa, Republican Joni Ernst jumps out to a 7-point lead over Congressman Bruce Braley. Last month, Ernst had just 1 point lead in the same poll. And now comments made by the man she's trying to replace, Senator Tom Harkin, are the focus of the campaign.
I don't care if she's as good looking as Taylor Swift or as nice as Mr. Rogers. But if she votes like Michelle Bachmann, she's wrong for the state of Iowa.
Tells Fox News she's offended by the remarks and that Harkin would have never said that about a man. In Arkansas, Republican Tom Cotton is holding an 8-point lead over incumbent Senator Mark Pryor, that according to the latest Rasmussen poll. Be sure to join us tomorrow night starting at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for your midterm election coverage. In other news, the State Department condemns mass killings at the hand of ISIS militants today.
That ISIL does not represent anything but its warped ideology and provides more evidence, if any were needed, why our coalition partners, including Iraqis from every background, must work together to defeat these terrorists.
Those comments come after continued ISIS brutality against Iraqi civilians, including women and children. Today, Islamic State terrorists publicly executed dozens of people for the third day in a row in the Sunni-controlled Anbar province. And back here at home, prosecutors in Chicago say the younger siblings of a man charged with seeking to join ISIS were also arrested. The latest developments come during a hearing today for Mohammed Hamza Khan. Khan was arrested at O'Hare International Airport last month to the Mideast, and now we know 2 of his brothers were also taken into custody. However, they haven't been charged in the case. And take a look at this death-defying act. Daredevil Nick Wallenda takes a high-wire walk through the sky above Chicago. It took nearly 7 minutes to walk between the 2 Marina City towers, and no net. I'm Francesca Page with your very latest Newsmax Now update. Remember, as always, to stay connected with us at newsmax.com.
It probably was an impolitic thing to bring up right now, 4 days election, given the coalition that she needs to build for victory. But I also think she was speaking the truth. African Americans have had it harder in the South. That's the American history.
This is crunch time in these campaigns, and that's a terrible thing to say.
All right, folks, there you go. Little CNN take on the Mary Landrieu statement about blacks in the South. Joining us now is our friend Bill Kristol, editor of the Weekly Standard. And Bill, what are you predicting for tomorrow night?
You know, usually kind of pessimistic about these things, but I am uncharacteristically optimistic. I'm predicting a Republican gain of 9 or 10 Senate seats. I think they win all the ones that looks like they're going to win, and the 2 or 3 they're really tight, New Hampshire, North Carolina. I think may well topple to the Republicans. Kansas, I'm less certain about. I just think there is an incumbent getting 42 or 43% in the polls probably loses, but that's obviously very close too.
So the fear-mongering, the race baiting, none of that is going to work.
Well, you know, we'll see. It's worked at times, and I don't know. It just feels desperate to me. It feels out of sync with where the country is. I mean, we have an African-American president. We have had many, last administration as well, very senior African-American officials, most popular actors, TV hosts, you name it, right? I mean, it's a little, are there racial problems in this country? Is there a legacy from discrimination? Sure, but is this kind of crazy fear-mongering? Ferguson, Missouri, that's one of the main cards they played. Isn't the governor of that state a Democrat? Isn't actually one of the senators from that state a Democrat? I mean, is that a state that's represented, that's full of, being run by racist Republicans? I don't think so. So, what are they talking about even? I mean, it just seems so far removed from reality that I can't believe it's going to move voters.
Now, let's assume that your wonderful prediction, in my view, comes true, and we're all celebrating in our own way the next day. And then, of course, we're going to have to overcome the ramming through of the next Attorney General by a 51-vote margin in the lame duck session. But when we move to next year, what are you expecting? Jeff Sessions is going to be on with us in a little while, says vote Republican and we will stop the president's amnesty executive order. Of course, they can stop the funding, but will they?
I don't know. And I mean, stop the funding or hamper it or limit it in a bunch of ways. I think there'll be a big debate after a day or two of celebration, assuming Republicans win the Senate. There'll be a big debate about how to conduct themselves, first in the lame duck session that begins in just a week, then in general. And I guess I'm inclined, I know the voices of prudence and sobriety in Washington are making a case. It's not a ridiculous case that go slow, do bite-sized things, don't overreach, don't make the mistakes of the shutdown or Gingrich in '95. But I got to think, if voters tend to repudiate this administration, they don't want the people they're now sending to Washington to just roll over for President Obama. They don't want them to be timid. They don't want them to be crazy. But I think Republicans need to think hard about a big, ambitious agenda, force President Obama to veto some things, try to stop what they can stop, and fight hard to stop something that's really bad policy and beyond the president's constitutional authority, like the kinds of immigration moves he's threatening to make.
Yeah, no, that would seem to make absolute sense. Let's talk a little bit about Joni Ernst. We had Reince Priebus on the other day, and he said, quote unquote, she is our best candidate out there. Weigh in on that, and also weigh in on what Tom Harkin said. And, I can only imagine what the media would have done to any Republican who would have even dared to bring up anything about Hillary, whether it be her clothes or her looks or her hair, in much the same manner.
Oh, it's unbelievable. I mean, a woman who's, run a terrific campaign. People forget that defeated a guy, a self-funder, a businessman who was outspending her in the primary, was probably favored by more of the Republican establishment types and consultant types in Washington than Joni Ernst was. She beat Jacobs in the primary. She's now beating Braley in the general election, it looks like, in a tough state, in a competitive state. Very admirable, very impressive, and of course, and she fought for the country in Iraq. So Tom Harkin feels he's entitled to condescend to her. I think she will end up with a more distinguished political career and a more distinguished service to the country than Tom Harkin, honestly. I think she's a good candidate. I think Tom Cotton's a terrific candidate. I think Ben Sass in Nebraska is an excellent candidate. Danny Sullivan in Alaska. I mean, you look around the country, it's actually pretty striking. Cory Gardner in Colorado. This is not a Republican Party that's just coasting in with a bunch of time servers or people who punched the clock on their way up. I mean, this is a lot of younger candidates. In the 7 most competitive Senate races, the Republicans have the younger candidate. And I think the younger, with diverse backgrounds, several have served the country in the military. I think it's a real sign of a rejuvenation of the Republican Party and of the conservative movement, actually, politically.
Great. And you say 9 to 10 or 8 to 10 seats, right?
That's what I'm saying. I'm hoping, and I'm really
Well, wait, Bill. I'm writing this down. No. I'm writing it down.
The longest shot that I'm hoping for. I mean, I think it's pretty easy to get to 8 or 9 if you just assume those 2 or 3 Republicans.
I'm up against the clock, Bill, but I got to go. We'll speak to you afterward. Thank you, sir. Bill Kristol, ladies and gentlemen.
Huge possible upset in Virginia.
Gotcha. We'll watch Virginia. Rafi Williams, RNC's next.